Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be looking at another card in Pokemon and analyzing how well it is designed. Today we're looking at Eternatus VMAX, pretty strong dark Pokemon VMAX, and also you see in the right here we have the star rating. So I asked subscribers what they thought, how good this card was out of 4 stars, which would translate to 40 points. And so the average here was 2.07. You see that, and of course that would be multiplied by 10, so like 21 or so is how they would say. But a lot of people had very different opinions on this. The most common one was 3 stars, but it was pretty spread between 1, 2, and 3. So 10, 20, or 30. Not many people thought it was amazingly powerful, amazingly bad, or amazingly good in terms of how well it was designed. So it's interesting. That's nothing crazy, but people are leaning more towards, say, like 21. We see maybe a little higher. So we see that's just something we can compare, that I can compare to, and so I can know how well I'm doing with this. I guess, of course, it's all pretty subjective, but it's interesting knowing what different people think about this. And so if you want to vote in these, make sure you subscribe and probably hit the notification bell. That's the best way you can see it. It'll be under the community tab, but if you hit the bell, you'll be able to see it much easier. And yeah, comment down below what you think of this idea, and if you want more data, less data, and also what you guys can contribute, because that means a lot. If you can, obviously just voting in this is useful. We got, I think, like 20-something people, which is really nice to see these people participating and just helping with the channel. But let's get into it. So first of all, is Eternatus VMAX interesting in a vacuum? And if you don't know the conditions, how I'm rating it, check out a video. There should be a link down below in the description to the video where I just explain the categories. But interesting in a vacuum, pretty much does it look interesting on its own. First of all, 340 HP is massive. So for a VMAX, that's quite good. It's the biggest we've ever seen, right? So it's very good, and it has an interesting ability, Eternal Zone. This is if all your Pokemon play a Dark type, you can have up to 8 Pokemon on your bench, and then you can't play non-Dark Pokemon. And if it turns off, you don't. You discard down until you have 5 bench Pokemon. So that's okay. It's not that good. It restricts you, but it does allow you to have a bigger bench. But of course, then this synergizes with the attack here, Dread End. This attack is 30 for each of your Dark Pokemon in play. So that means for 2 energy, 1 dark, 1 colorless, you can hit 270 damage if you have a full bench of dark Pokemon. Now that's quite a lot to ask, and of course if you're playing this deck, you'd only play dark Pokemon. So that's quite limiting, but not necessarily in a bad way. It changes the game a little because now you don't have access to all the engine pieces. So you'll just have essentially the pool of cards you can choose from is around 1/10 the size that you normally would, which changes it a little. Almost makes playing Eternatus, building it especially, feel like you're building a deck in a custom format, because now you have some limited options, but it's still interesting. You still, of course, also have all the trainer options. You can have a very strong deck, assuming that it works, because Eternatus VMAX isn't that hard to power up and has big payoff. 270 is a ton for 2 energy, or 270 is just a ton. Anyways, so it looks pretty good, but not like crazy good, and it looks interesting. Nothing crazy, but well, no, it looks pretty cool and fun Pokemon to mess around with, because now you have to work under these separate set of rules and another restriction that you wouldn't normally have. So I give this a 7 out of 10 because it's a cool card. It's nothing crazy here, but it's a cool card. And so now let's look at it within context. And now there's actually a Pokemon I realized that I don't have here that I kind of want to have, but it's fine. I'll talk about it because I am making the video after all. But so these are all the Pokemon that it has access. I mean, it has access to a lot more, but these are all the good ones. And of course, some of these weren't out at the same time, like the Volatile GX and Hisuian Samurai V-Star were definitely not in the same format. We're looking at stuff like Crobat V is the go-to here. The ones on the left are the really strong ones. So Crobat V, draw till you have 6 on play. And that's amazing synergy. You always pretty much have to play it, especially because you don't have access to other engines like Inteleon and Chino and other stuff. And so Crobat V, especially when at the time in which Eternatus came out, and they came out in the same set as well, so clearly meant to be together. you need some engine, and Crobat's a relatively low maintenance engine. It takes up a lot of bench space, but bench space is what you're looking for in this deck, so it has perfect synergy there. It's not overpowered by any means, but it's good. And you can also attack with it, which is fine. And then Galarian Moltres V allows you to accelerate to it, meaning that you can use Energy Switch to power up Eternatus VMAX. You could also just attack with Galarian Moltres V, and it's just a very solid Pokemon all in all. Galarian Zigzagoon on play, and this is one of the utility Pokemon that we see popping up in Dark type. Of course, you lack a lot of utility Pokemon, but Galarian Zigzagoon is one that you still have access to, allowing you to just get a bit more damage into play. And then Galarian Weezing here, which is a really powerful card, allowing you to control the board by ability locking your opponent and also poisoning. And we noticed there are a few other combo pieces. So with Galarian Zigzagoon, we see Yveltal GX. And Yveltal GX does an instant KO if they have 4 damage counters on them. Very powerful with Galarian Zigzagoon, as well as, well, just with Galarian Zigzagoon, pretty much. So that's really interesting. And another combo piece within the Eternatus deck, which is interesting. One thing you could be scared of is when you're restricting it to one type, do you lose all the combos? But you don't. We see all these combos here. Galarian Weezing with a Radiant Hisuian Sneasler providing good value. This is how it's generally played today because it allows you to just build up a lot of poison damage in addition to slowing the pace of the game down by ability locking. So these 4 on the left are very strong, and the best probably. But we see another poison package actually. This is really funny that there's actually multiple poison packages. The one on the right here, Galarian Slowbro V, paired with Toxicroak, allowing you to get some extra poison damage in addition to being able to attack with Eternatus VMAX to allow you to hit a bit more damage so you can KO even more Pokemon. Now this build wasn't that good, but it wasn't bad either. I saw some solid play when Eternatus came out. And then there's also some very solid utility Pokemon like Umbreon VMAX and Hisuian Samurott V-Star. Hisuian Samurott V-Star, a solid attacker and dealing some extra damage. Umbreon VMAX providing gusting, which is just amazing. There's also stuff like Darkrai V-Star, which is very good. And then we look at one of the most interesting ones. Nothing crazy, though. Really, you look at all these Pokemon and they're solid. But really, the focus of the deck is always going to be Eternatus, so you don't have any crazy partners here. But the most crazy is probably Weavile GX. But first, Galarian Moltres. Maybe Galarian Moltres accelerates energy to itself on play. So a bit more of an awkward version of Galarian Moltres V, but it does hit high damage in the late game, and most importantly, it gets more dark energy in play. This is because Weavile GX allows you to move dark energy around on different places in your board. And so that's really good, allowing you to power up Eternatus VMAX, and then the Pokemon GX in very small print in the right here. Umbreon and Darkrai GX, a very powerful tag team GX that, is Dark type and also hits hard, very unique GX attack that allows you just to completely stop the game and take an extra turn. It's really good. It stops your opponent from, I think, playing trainers and then instant KOs. I don't know. I don't exactly remember, but I know it's very good. So that's an attack that you're definitely scared of. You need a lot of energy. But the Galarian Moltres and the Galarian Moltres V allow you to get that into play, combined with Weavile GX. And then also with Weavile GX in expanded format, which isn't really the target of Pokemon. Pokemon's generally designing cards for standard, and players generally play standard as well. But Weavile GX here allows you to move dark energy, of course. And there's a Pokemon called Kecleon, which is a colorless Pokemon, which is interesting because it's not dark. So you'd be like, well, you can't play this. But you can, of course. You need to get it in play before you've got your Eternatus VMAX. But it's really interesting. When it has dark energy attached to it, it's a dark type Pokemon. So then all your Pokemon are dark type on your bench. So you can have all the 8 bench spots. But then if you move the dark energy off of Kecleon, now it's not dark type anymore. So then your bench shrinks. So you can expand and shrink your bench. And then you can get a Pokemon Darkrai GX that accelerates, if it's in the discard pile, it's a basic Pokemon, but you can put it straight onto your bench and attach a basic dark energy from your discard to it. And then you can move that off with Weavile onto, say, Eternatus or Weavile or whatever, and then move a dark energy off of Kecleon and then shrink your bench back down and discard your Darkrai again. You can do that over and over. And that's pretty silly, but it actually works. And so that's an interesting combo. Really creative, but generally you don't see combo. That's probably one of the craziest combos we've ever seen in Pokemon because it's just absurd where you're just shrinking and expanding your bench. But overall, Weavile GX is just a really funny card, and one that just, yeah, it's cool. And it pairs well with Eternatus. There are a lot of really good partners for Eternatus. There's also Lipard, a new card that's quite recent, so it hasn't seen a ton of play with Eternatus or in general, but it's Lipard. It's a dark type Pokemon with the draw ability, very powerful. And in expanded, you also have stuff like Zoroark GX, and there are tons of options in expanded. But all in all, it's really interesting. And from the amount of options here, you might know what I'm going to give it in this category. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. It's just so crazy. And it's interesting because no other deck is going to play like this, because you don't need to play like this. You can access stronger options. But with Eternatus itself is the strong option, supported by pretty solid options. But nothing else here really is super game-breaking. Maybe some of the stuff on the left, but really Eternatus VMAX carries its own weight, and then is supported by strong Pokemon. And that's what makes it so interesting and so well-designed, at least within this aspect. Looking at the next thing, is it fun to play against? So it's hard to judge how fun a card is to play against, but it's very important to think of as well. So obviously you have Eternatus, and then Crobat almost always played with it. So that's why I have those two on the left. Eternatus VMAX has a big HP, just does big damage to the active. Very straightforward. Crobat V, of course the Eternatus player needs to work their way through it. But what they're doing is generally pretty straightforward, assuming they're not ability locking you, which isn't built into Eternatus by any means. And then they're going to probably play a lot of Crobat Vs to draw a bunch of cards. So this means that there are a few things you can do to beat them. You can obviously just hit through their Eternatus, which is somewhat hard because they have big HP, but it's far from impossible. And then you can also instead choose to snipe or gust up their Crobat Vs. And either of those game plans are solid. They're generally going to give you enough resources, or they're going to play enough of their resources so that you can take all your prizes by carrying Crobats or by carrying Eternatus. So that means that no matter what deck you're playing, you can generally stand a pretty good shot against Eternatus, assuming it's not like a dark weak deck, which is like a problem with every thing. And some people say that weakness is too strong. That being said, if you want to counter Eternatus, there's some very strong counters, and admittedly not very fun counters. Avery, it's a supporter where you draw 3, but then your opponent discards from their bench until they have 3 cards left. So that's like quite a lot, because Eternatus wants 8 bench Pokemon. Normally Avery would only discard 2 Pokemon at most, but now Avery's discarding 5 Pokemon, which is absurd. That's like over half their Pokemon, and they're just sitting over there crying because they've lost like a lot of their damage output. They might not even be able to power that up ever. They might not be able to get up to full damage. So that's unfortunate for Eternatus, the Eternatus player, and a bit of an easy counter to throw into any deck because it's just a solid card. It's not a great card, but it's not bad either. It's just a variation of Hop that provides very good value in this matchup, mostly in particular. And then you can also do Path to the Peak, turning off both the ability of the Crobat and the Eternatus. This is very powerful because it reduces their ability to set up because they can't really draw as well. And it also, of course, turns off their Eternal Zone ability, reducing their damage output. And you may be thinking, like, they can get around that, and they kind of can by either one, playing lots of stadiums, which they have to because of Path, or by just dealing with it because it only reduces their damage by, well, it reduces it by 90, which is quite a bit, but they can still get like two hit KOs, which are often enough, but it's not something good for the deck, reducing their draw engine and damage output and versatility as a whole as well. So it loses, it hurts Eternatus and is a very strong counter. And then lastly, we have Galarian Zapdos V. In my opinion, since I've been playing, which is around the start of the Sword and Shield era, or since I've been playing more seriously, which is since the start of the Sword and Shield era, Galarian Zapdos V is probably the biggest counter I've ever seen. Debatably, Drapion V is more of one, but the two are serious counters. Avery is also a strong counter to Eternatus. But Galarian Zapdos V here is fighting type, so it hits Eternatus for weakness. And admittedly, fighting type of weakness is very common, so there are interesting weakness triangle, fighting Dark Psychic, which Eternatus is part of, and Galarian Zapdos is part of. Galarian Zapdos V here. So it does 170 damage, so with weakness, the perfect amount of damage to one-shot Eternatus. Of course, you look at its attack cost, and it's fighting colorless, which is just absurd. It's not impossible to power up, but it's not a great counter to Eternatus by any means. So instead, to reduce its attack cost, because that is quite a lot, this Pokemon's attack costs 1 colorless less for each Pokemon V your opponent has in play. In a turn, this is guaranteed to have at least 3 Pokemon V in play, right? They want 1 VMAX, maybe 2, and a V on the bench if they don't have the VMAX. So that's 2 right there. And they're going to play a Crobat, right? They always play Crobat. Galarian Zapdos is always going to be 1 fighting, which is pretty easy to tech into any deck. Now, there used to be, before the rotation of, I believe it was Unified Minds. I think Unified Minds. There was a card called Weakness Guard Energy. So if you're a Eternatus and you're really scared of fighting decks, such as Urshifu, Colossal, and newer stuff as well. If you're scared of fighting, you could stick in Weakness Guard Energy, which does exactly what it sounds like. Stops you from being hit for a weakness. It's only a colorless, though, so it kind of hurts your deck because now you're not playing as many Dark Energies, which just isn't ideal. Because it never is. Special Energy always comes with some sacrifice. So you don't love it, but you don't hate it. It's not that taxing for you to play Weakness Guard. But then the Galarian Zapdos V, before doing damage, discards a Special Energy attached to your opponent's active. So that discards the Weakness Guard before you do damage. So then you still hit for weakness and KO them. So you need 2 Weakness Guard Energy on your turn to survive a hit from Galarian Zapdos V. You could stick a Big Charm on, but there are various ways of dealing with that. Damage increase in any way would, of course, deal with that, such as Leon or Choice Bell, which wasn't out at the time, but it's out now, so you can certainly stick that on your Galarian Zapdos, as well as any tool removal like Tool Scrap or Tool Jam or Lost Vacuum, anything like that. And then the Eternatus just dies. So this is like an annoyingly good counter. And Avery and Path are also annoyingly good counters. So it's not that fun in the sense that counters are just obnoxious, and so the counterplay isn't necessarily good, but it's not bad to play against, really, because if you play those, it's a free matchup, so I wouldn't say it's a bad time playing against it. And if you're playing a normal deck, you shouldn't really be sad to see this, because you have all your win conditions. Your opponent's not going to play that Manaphy, which completely stops your spread deck, and they're not some rogue single prize deck that your deck's not prepared to play against. Eternatus VMAX with Crobat V is the most generic deck like ever. So if you want to do anything fancy, you can play just like a fun deck with like a unique approach. You can run it against Eternatus. They're just what you should be expecting. They hit hard and have a VMAX with a V support. It's just so generic, which isn't bad because playing against generic decks, this is a deck that your opponent isn't going to do anything crazy with. So you can just play like you want to play. Some decks, unless they play Weezing, of course, but that usually isn't how they play. Right now, that's how they often play. But I don't think that we should hurt Eternatus because of Weezing, right? So this is going to end up with a solid 6 out of 10. Of course, it's nothing crazy interesting, and of course, Weezing, I'd say, hurts it a little, so some of the other, Path and Avery are just annoying, and they see more play because of Eternatus. It's not the best, but it's not bad. I think it's solid. When I see Amance Eternatus, I'm like, okay, this is cool. Except for one issue, which I'll get to now. Is it balanced? So, this is interesting because its damage is 270, 10 short of KOing from one-shotting Arceus V-Star and EDP GX here. So the tag teams or the V-Stars, which are very much meta, Eternatus just messes them up. That's pretty crazy because all these amazingly powerful cards, Eternatus just wipes the floor with. So yeah, that's a bit of an issue. It seems like it's a bit too strong. That being said, there's a lot of counterplay, right? You see Path of the Peak, and then I have Crobat V. I should maybe have moved it over, but Crobat V is just a card that Eternatus always runs, which you can prey on. So Eternatus VMAX's ability really hurts it. It's just vulnerable to being turned off by Path, and because of the smaller card pool, you know what Eternatus is going to be playing, and you're able to target that easier. So while it is very strong, because of its counterplay, it's not overpowered. It's not that overpowered. Maybe this is a bit of a hot take, but I think it's pretty well designed. I'm going to give it 6 out of 10 for balance, so that's good. It's not amazing, but it's pretty solid, and it's able to hold up as well. It's been in the metagame since this came out, but it hasn't been top of the meta. I mean, admittedly there was a 6-month period when it came out when it was top of the meta, but at the same time, ADP was also top of the meta, and Sense Scorch was very good, and there were a lot of other very good decks at the same time. So people say Eternatus was, like, it kind of looked overpowered, but it's not perfect, but it's pretty solid. So what's the total score here? It's 29 out of 40. So a bit higher than the Starving. I say it's pretty mediocre. I actually did not change the text, although it's above average. It's above average. Yeah, I probably should have said. I unsurprisingly I reused the same slides, and I forgot to change that. I've had some technical difficulties on other ones that I haven't spoken about on them. But yeah, it's a bit better than pretty mediocre. It's not amazing, but it's good. It's well designed. This is a card that changes the design space in an interesting way, which can be problematic, but Pokemon has dealt with it very well. They printed just the right number of solid Dark Pokemon. Dark's been a good type since Eternatus has come out, and even before then. And they've done a good job of designing Dark. It is admittedly a very hard card to design and keep up with, because any Dark Pokemon, you need to think of how it would affect Eternatus. Because if Eternatus has any more options, it might be broken. And at some points, it maybe has been broken. So people were saying that it should be like a 21 out of 40 or so, which would be pretty mediocre. But then I said 29 out of 40, so not broken by any means. Still in the 20s range, but not very, very top of the 20s, of course. So yeah, pretty solid. Not the best, certainly. There are a number of cards that I plan on covering. The ones I've been thinking about are like the best of the best, right? Because they're the ones that catch your attention. But yeah, Eternatus VMAX, pretty solid. At first I thought it wasn't well designed, but because of the way it restricts the design space, but that's actually what makes it more interesting. But I hope you've been enjoying Pokemon. I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry, I've rambled on a bit, but Eternatus is an interesting card, especially it's one that's been out for so long. I've talked about like Mew VMAX and Lugia V-Star. They're nowhere near as old as Eternatus. So not that Eternatus is that old either, but there's pretty much its whole life has been walked through right now. So it's interesting. And it's an interesting card to look back on and just enjoy. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy Eternatus. I hope you don't run into too much wheezing. I guess I should cover that at some point. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.